So you're thinking about buying a house in the East Bay. Today is going to be an excellent episode for you because we're going to talk about what it's like to live a little bit further inland compared to a little closer to the bay. Things like ease of public transportation, commuting and traffic, weather, schools, and tons of activities, both indoor and outdoor, and where you might find your best fit for living in the East Bay. If you've never checked out my channel before, we talk about all things Bay Area living. So hit that subscribe button if you're considering buying or selling a house in the Bay Area or just want to keep up with the newest market trends and activity. I'm Andrea West. I've been a realtor since 2010 and I'm a Bay Area native. I'm originally from up north in Marin County where I lived through my late 20s, started my career and bought my first home there. Then we moved to San Francisco and lived in the Nopa district for 8 awesome years before we bought our family compound in the city and island of Alameda in the East Bay in 2019. So I know Bay Area real estate from both sides of the bridge. So whether you're committed to the East Bay or not, if you're thinking about buying a home in the Bay Area, give me a call, shoot me a text, send me an email, or book a Zoom with me. My QR code is in my banner. I'd love to meet you. All right, so let's take a look here at the East Bay in the Bay Area just so you can get oriented. So the East Bay here are these two counties, Contra, Costa, and Alameda counties. Then you've obviously got San Francisco here, the peninsula and the South Bay, and then up north you've got the North Bay. And then over here, if we're even looking outside the Bay Area, you've got up into Sacramento, you've got the San Joaquin Valley going down into Modesto, and then you can go even further down, you get into the valley. One of the things I love about the East Bay is just how centrally located it is. So if you need to go on up north and you want to go wine tasting or have a nice weekend up at the lake, or if you want to go down south and you want to go to San Jose or go down to the Gilroy Garlic Festival, or heck, even go on down to Santa Cruz and go check out some great beaches and surfing, you're very easily located to do both of those things on a weekend trip, no problem. Even an hour, hour and a half, depending on where you're going, you can go up for the afternoon. And super convenient if you're commuting into San Francisco for work, for example. The East Bay has got a ton to offer in terms of activities and proximity to get in and out of the East Bay as well if you're enjoying activities elsewhere. So what is it like living in the East Bay, and then what's some of the differences? Well, this is Contra Costa County and this is Alameda County. These are the two counties that make up the East Bay. The total population over here is around 2.8 million. So the East Bay is actually the most populated region of the 5 regions in the Bay Area. That being said, the East Bay is incredibly diverse. A lot of the Bay Area is very diverse, but the East Bay has got a really good diversity, with Caucasian and Asian being neck and neck for the most populated ethnic background for the area. So somewhere around the 30 to 39% mark, the two of them tend to be trading off. The Latino community comes in third, right around the 20 to 25% mark. After that, the African American community is right around the 10% mark. And then after that, you have a mix of Pacific Islander, Native American, Native Alaskan, and folks with 2 or more ethnic backgrounds. So that being said, it's an amazing melting pot of just awesome food, rich culture, and lots of accepting, wonderful communities. It's so vibrant in the East Bay. And depending on where you live and what you want your vibe to be, it's such a rich culture. There is something for everybody in the East Bay. So comparing what it's like to live in different parts of the East Bay, I'm actually gonna not compare Contra Costa to Alameda so much as I'm going to compare living inland to living over here along the bay more. And that's just because of how the weather and how the commute and transit options change the further inland you go. Now, Contra Costa is north more, so it is a little bit closer to going to wine country, going up into Marin or Vacaville. If you like to go out to the outlets up there, if you want to get into Sacramento. Versus down here, Alameda, you are a little bit closer to Silicon Valley and you're closer to the South Bay. But now if we're going to split it up east and west, you've got 680 that kind of runs this whole corridor down in between both counties. So when I refer to living more inland, this is what I'm referring to. So after Dublin, Pleasanton, over here in Alameda, you've got Livermore, and then up, and then going out toward Mountain House, which is really just outside the East Bay, because then you've got Tracy, Because then over here you've got Mountain House and Tracy, and then this takes you over into Stockton. Now, technically this is not part of the Bay Area, but a lot of folks ended up buying out here, especially in the pandemic, because the cost of housing in the San Joaquin Valley is significantly less than it is, for example, in the East Bay. You can get a house out in Stockton or Tracy for around 500, 700,000. The houses out there tend to be bigger. The lots tend to be bigger. You can get maybe something that's a newer build. You can get something with a bigger lot. You can have, space for a pool, that kind of thing. And it just really depends on where you're looking and what you have. Versus other parts of the East Bay, the cost of living and the cost of housing is much greater. That being said, comparing what it's like living out in this area compared to here, well, one thing that first comes to mind, of course, is the closer you live toward the Bay, you are going to have much more density in your housing. So houses are a lot closer together. Your population per capita is a lot higher. You're also going to have more options for public transit. So things like Bay Area Rapid Transit and ferry terminals are a lot more prominent in these areas than they are as you go further inland. Obviously, you're not getting ferries inland because there's no water to commute in. Also, your BART options tend to be a little bit less plentiful the further in you go. Let's take a look real quick at the transit map so you can see what I'm talking about. So here's the BART map. And again, BART stands for Bay Area Rapid Transit. So this is our subway system for the Bay Area. So over here is San Francisco. You can see the white here is the land and the blue is the bay. So over here you got San Francisco, and you've got tons of stops because a lot of people are commuting in San Francisco, especially here downtown to Embarcadero, Montgomery. So all of the colored lines going from the East Bay and coming up through the peninsula all go through downtown because that's where most people are commuting. Now, if you're looking over here in the East Bay, you can see how it connects up here north in Richmond. Down here, it even actually goes all the way to San Jose now. That's newer, just in the past few years. And then up here goes Dublin, Pleasanton. That is as far east as it goes in the Alameda County area. And then up here, it does go out into Antioch on the yellow line. To give you a lay of the land for the ferries, again, most people are commuting into, this is the Embarcadero, the ferry terminal, the ferry building terminal. You've also got one at Pier 41, Oracle Park if you're going to go see a Giants game, the Chase Center if you're going to go check out the Warriors, and there is even a ferry that goes into South City. And then you can see here they connect. These are both in Alameda. This is the island, and then this is the peninsula of Alameda, which is Harbor Bay. This is Oakland over here at Jack London Square. This is up here at Point Richmond, and then up here in Vallejo and Mare Island. And then these all get you in and out of the city. So if you're in the inner part of the Bay, your commute is much easier. Great. So now that we know where the public transit is, and you decide whether or not you want to be near public transit, driving, obviously, you are going to hit a lot of traffic during commute hours. And that's just the way of it. So the further inland you go, the more commute traffic you're going to hit. So depending on what time of day it is, it can take, I live over here in this island of Alameda. It can take me anywhere from 20 minutes or 25 minutes to get to downtown San Francisco with no traffic. On a heavy traffic day, it can take me 45 minutes to an hour. So it can double my commute, and I don't live that far. Now, someone who might live in Dublin, Pleasanton, Livermore, or Antioch, it can take you an hour or an hour and 15 minutes to get to San Francisco, no traffic. It can easily be 2 to 2.5 hours with traffic. So a lot of people do enjoy using the public transit. And now, of course, when COVID hit, a lot of people started realizing, hey, they could only had to go to the office 2 or 3 days a week. They could work from home. So living in places like Antioch, Oakley, Discovery Bay, Brentwood, Livermore, Dublin, Pleasanton became a lot more attractive because now you got more space, you got bigger outdoor space. Maybe you were taking an hour to an hour and a half to get to work, but you could take BART and you only had to do it 2 or 3 days a week. Didn't seem so bad. So we saw a lot of appreciation, a lot of popularity in these areas in the past few years just because of COVID and lifestyle changes. So now that you know where all the public transit options are, and comparing what is it like living a little further inland versus over here along the bay. So in addition to having more easy access here, one thing to note is most of these towns and cities are much more densely populated than something that's a little bit further inland and even further inland more. As I mentioned, during COVID, everyone was moving here, you got more space. So if you want, that big house with a lot more space, looking out in these areas makes more sense. If you want to live in like the Dublin, Pleasanton, San Ramon Valley area, you can get a much larger home that maybe was built in the last 30 or 40 years versus maybe living somewhere like Oakland, Berkeley, San Leandro, Alameda. You're probably buying a house that was built in the early 1900s. And yeah, it might be quite large, but what you're going to get over here that you don't get here, the square footage is probably going to be larger. You're probably going to have more land and more space. Versus here, you could get something that has larger square feet. Chances are it won't have as much land with it. And your price per square foot may end up being more because you're a little more centrally located, but not necessarily, because over here you have the offset in some of the homes of being a newer home, having higher end finishes, a more landscaped yard or a pool, things like that. So just depending all across the board, you've got really good options. And I would say as you go up the 680 corridor and compare versus along the 8580 corridor here, you're again going to have a lot more options for more space, bigger houses versus over here. Yeah, you may find some, but more likely than not, you're going to find slightly smaller houses with slightly smaller lots. The weather, when you're comparing the two, is another big factor. So in the summer, over here along this corridor, it gets hot. For me in Alameda, it gets, in the 80s, and that's a pretty hot day. It can hit 90. But not super often, but it does. It can hit 90 in the summer. Versus you go out here, San Ramon, Dublin, Pleasanton, Walnut Creek, Alamo, all along 680, you're hitting 100 degrees several times throughout the summer. It does get quite warm. And, we don't have a lot of humidity here, generally speaking, so it is a drier heat. The further inland you go from there, the more hot days you're going to get and the hotter they're going to get. So once you get out to like Brentwood, Discovery Bay, Oakley, or out here in Livermore, you're really getting over 100 degrees several times throughout the summer. Versus again, along here, kind of 80s to 90s is what you would expect for a hot summer day. Now, when you get down in here to Fremont, Union City, Newark, I would also say this area starts to get hotter in the summer too. You're getting a little bit closer to the South Bay. You don't have you're still a little bit further from the actual ocean. The ocean's what's bringing in the cooler front. Over here, you're a little bit further. You're set back further than you are, say, up here. In addition to weather, so with the higher weather and the more space, the neighborhoods and the city vibes change a lot as you go further in. So over here, as I mentioned, a lot more densely populated. So there's a lot more urban comforts. You've got a lot of restaurant options, bar options, coffee shops, shopping, tons of things to do, lots of activities, all, along the Bay Area, the Bay side of the Bay Area. Here into 680, you're going to have a lot more suburban feeling. You're going to have less urban comforts, more suburban comforts, still really good food, still lots of things to do. A lot more outdoor activities start in between these two because you can see we've got these big open spaces here. So there's lots of hiking in like Mount Diablo. You can go out to Lake Chabot. You can go get a boat out at the reservoir. You can even head on up here into the Delta and take out a boat. There's tons of outdoor activities all throughout the East Bay. Once you start coming from out here, Concord, Walnut Creek, San Ramon, Dublin, Pleasanton, and then go out further east, you start to see more agriculture start to come in because we have a lot more land and you can just see that. So once you get into Livermore, there's actually some really great wineries that are fun down there. You'll also start seeing more things like cows and sheep and goats and chickens the further out you go, just kind of, grazing on the side of the road because they've got a lot of areas to graze. They have lots more areas to graze for the farmers to take them out. So when you get out here into Brentwood and Discovery Bay, you're going to see even more like agriculture. You'll see things like strawberry fields and apricot orchards and cherries. And you can go out and pick them, and it's really fun. And you can do that down in Fremont even too. They've got some cherry orchards and things to go down and pick. So it's sprinkled all throughout the East Bay, but you'll start to get more of it the further inland you go. Discovery Bay, as a side note, is really fun. There's lots of water activities to do. You can see here through the Delta. You can get that out here at Bethel Island and up in Oakley, Antioch. And so if you enjoy the Delta as well, this is a really fun area as well. People ask about the schools in the East Bay. I don't like to get too into schools because every city handles the school districts differently. For example, some cities actually do a lottery-based system for their schools. So depending on where you purchase your home may not determine where your kid goes to school. You have to actually apply and go through the lottery system. So always check out greatschools.org. That is, of course, not every city. It's just a couple of cities throughout the East Bay. But the other cities that have excellent schools that are more straightforward, you can check out on there as well. I hope this overview of the East Bay gave you a lot to think about and give you a good lay of the land of where you may want to start looking for a home or what fits you and your family's needs. Now that you kind of have an idea of where things are throughout the East Bay, let's talk a little bit about housing prices throughout the East Bay. Because one of the things I love is there are some areas with less expensive housing. So if your budget is, say, under $1 million, there are areas in the East Bay that you can definitely find a decent house for under $1 million. There are even areas you can find a house for $500,000 to $700,000. If you're looking for a more budget-friendly home, places like Antioch, Pittsburgh, and Bay Point will offer you a home around $500,000 to $700,000. Also, areas like Martinez, Concord, certain parts of Rodeo, Hercules, and Pinole, some parts of Richmond as well, also in the $500,000 to $700,000 area. You might be able to get something up here in the Richmond, San Pablo, Hercules, Rodeo area as well. Oakland offers one of the biggest variances in prices for houses for any city. And that's partially just because Oakland is so large. So there are parts of Oakland that you can get a single family house for around $500,000 to $600,000. And then there are other parts of Oakland that a single family house is gonna start you at $1 million plus. So when we're comparing a starter home around $500,000 to $700,000 in the areas that I mentioned, the homes are going to be a little more on the modest side in terms of size. The lots generally aren't going to be as big, and the homes probably won't be quite as updated or new. They might be a little bit older. That's not to say everywhere, but generally speaking. Now, if your budget is between $700,000 and $1 million, that opens up a lot more of the East Bay for you. And then if you like newer homes, newer construction, or bigger homes, 3, 4, 5 bedrooms, more than 2,000 square feet on a bigger lot. And yes, in the Bay Area, 2,000 square feet is considered a larger house. I know in some parts of the country, 2,000 square feet is not considered that large, but in the Bay Area, yeah, in certain parts definitely can be. So if that's more your speed, you want something around there, the Discovery Bay, Brentwood, Byron area is excellent. There's a lot of newer construction out there for under $1 million. Very nice homes. You can get some with bigger lots, not necessarily though. You've got more space out there. You can get a higher end home in the Antioch, Pittsburgh, Bay Point area. Over here in Clayton, you can get a really nice home for around $1 million or just under. And then also in the Pleasant Hill, Concord, Martinez area. As well over here, you can get a higher end home in these areas. Down into Oakland, again, you can get for $1 million, you can get a very nice home in certain areas. Same thing in San Leandro. Castro Valley generally starts around $1 million versus Hayward down here, you can get something for under $1 million for sure. Once you hit over the $1 million mark, then that opens up a lot more. The Livermore area, you may be able to get a home under $1 million. But once you start hitting the $1 million mark, you're going to open up even more parts of the Bay. So the $1 million to 1.5, most areas you can find an entry level home in the $1 million to 1.5 range. If you want a bigger home or a higher end home, most of these areas, you're gonna go between 1.5 to 3 or $3.5 million for most of these homes. If you like newer construction, if you like bigger homes, more land, more space, going here along the 680 corridor, you're gonna have a lot more options, as I mentioned, versus over here along the Bay. So your price per square foot, generally speaking, tends to go a little bit lower here because you're getting a bigger house for the same price that maybe a smaller house would cost you over here in like Berkeley, Albany, or Alameda. That's not to say that they're not both lovely homes, they're not great options, just really depends a lot on the location. I've got more breakout episodes coming for certain areas over here in the East Bay. I'm gonna break out different cities, different neighborhoods, So make sure you check back soon so you can check out more of the East Bay and get to know where it might be a great home for you. If you found this content valuable and you want to tune in for more, please hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. I would love to hear from you too. I would also love to hear from you and offer you a free consultation for buying or selling anywhere in the Bay Area. So give me a call, shoot me a text, send me an email, or book a Zoom with me. My QR code is in the banner. Because remember, I know Bay Area real estate from both sides of the bridge, and your goals are my business. Till next time, take care.